sentence, the student will be able to. Okay? And then,
yes, and sometimes when I'm writing my learning outcomes, as I did at the beginning of the workshop, instead of every sentence starting with the student will be able to calculate, or the student will be able to use, I'll put at the top. And if I'm handing this to the student, you know, because you'll sometimes say, the student of systems engineering will be able to, I'm handing it to the student, so I just say, at the end of this course, you will be able to. Or sometimes they turn it around and then just, I say that once, and I list them. And I don't even repeat the word to, I put that in the top part. A lot of times, because you're going to say, oh yeah, you think I will not. Okay? So sometimes I put, the course is designed so that you will be able to.
we also have a list of verbs. The poem, Bloom classification or something. Do you think that's a good
again, when we started, yes I do. But, the other thing too that we used to do when we were writing learning outcomes, we spent a lot of time, or you have, classifying them, using Bloom's taxonomy,
discussing about that,
talking about it, and we got the right verb, and in the end, for me that was a lot of, and I spent a lot of time doing that. But in the end, with the exception of, you know, helping me to, I don't think if you're even talking about the cognitive domain, the thinking domain, there were 6 levels. Okay? My particular interest in writing clear learning outcomes is so that I know how to assess. And those categories didn't help me make that decision because I would not assess differently. It didn't tell me how I should assess it. Whether I use the word describe or explain, or I'm going to assess that the same way. Okay. Now, if the verb were to build, okay, I have to say. So for me, that's not a useful, to me, I'm spinning my wheels. I don't think it's a useful, it's a good use of my time. If though, when you are, the way that I do think is if you take those 6 levels and you collapse it to 2, and you say, is this low-level thinking, high-level thinking? Okay? Describing, explaining, you know, I'm kind of saying them back to you. But if I have to analyze, if I have to synthesize, if I have to evaluate, that's a higher level kind of thinking. So it makes a difference what word you use there. Because if I just write describe for me,
it's memory.
It's memory. Okay? So it's useful to me for assessment if I just split it that way. But if I just use that list, because when you're using Bloom, did you just use that list of 6?
Yes.
Did you look at the affective domain or the psychomotor domain?
I don't remember
Just
now.
the cognitive.
There are 3
just use the
cognitive.
That's the one we
So
use.
it, yes.
We use
So-
here the cognitive domain.
Yes. So I don't want you to think that it's not useful. When they established, I say they because when I got to MIT, the CDO syllabus had been designed and they were just finishing the validation studies. And they spent an enormous amount of time with the Bloom verbs. And so I don't want to say that it was not a good use of time. But when I'm looking at learning outcomes in a course, first of all, they're a communication from me to the student so the student knows what to expect and what they're going to be able to do. But secondly, and for me, the most important thing is that it needs to give me a clue about how I'm going to teach it, and it needs to give me a clue about how I'm going to assess it. So there's actually a different taxonomy, it's not a taxonomy, a series of 5 categories. Another scheme that will look at that is easier for me to say, okay, if I have this, which one of 5 boxes does it fit into? Because I'm going to evaluate those boxes differently. It tells me, it gives me a clue to how I'm going to teach and how I'm going to assess. All right? And so it's more useful to me. So I don't go through the process of saying, I might do is that a knowledge outcome, a skill outcome, or an attitude? But you see, those are going to be 3 of those 5 categories. Okay? That will tell me how I'm going to assess. By way of, you've got a reprieve, 21. Let's just do a few more examples. 21.
Number 21, the skill or behavior will be demonstrate both responsibility and integrity. The condition would be working in a project work with teams, but I see no standard.
Great. Okay. Notice how, and notice this is an attitude. You're going to say, and how are we going to assess it? We're going to look at that actually within the assessment of teamwork. We're going to look for evidence of responsibility and integrity.
In indicators or
Indicators
certain pattern or
of some kind. We'll just do a couple more. 18.
Yeah.
Oh, back here. Okay.
Choose a basis for the client or the space table for a specific geometric problem. I think skill, only skill.
It's a skill. And what is the skill?
Choose.
Select. Select the reason or the basis for planar space. Now you might say suitable for, is that a condition? It could be part of the behavior. Okay, it may not be a condition. What about if you had a, how many of you, or who of you, which of the examples, this is in English, imagine when I do it in Spanish, which of the examples has a condition? Who had one that had a condition? 12. 12. Look at 12. You agree? What's the condition?
Condiciones, explicar a alguien otra
In human environments, who else had a condition? Who else has a condition? Which of the numbers? That's like the playing card. Who has a condition?
number 4.
Number 8.
Create interactive 3D models of products and environments. And the condition is using
Using whatever that is, VRML.
virtual reality.
Which other one? 2. 12.
No, 2.
24.
2. Let's look at not 12. Dos. I do that all the time. Look at dos.
Yep.
That's a tricky one. Let's see if he gets this.
Using live and draft calculation.
So what's the behavior? What's the skill or behavior? They're evaluating. So notice it got turned around. That's very good. So they're really asked to evaluate, and the condition is
Using live.
calculation. Who else has a condition? Who else? Which other objectives have a condition?
23.
23. 23.
Take a leadership role in the solution of complex technological problems, both in university and professional situations.
It's the situation here, the condition, university and professional situation.
But also complex technological problems, because we could say, take a leadership role in the solutions of problems.
Okay, that these have to be complex problems, so a condition. Okay, good.
19.
These 19.
Yes, 15.
Condition?
As a part of a panel.
No, wait. 19?
The condition is using matrix inverse and matrix calculation.
Perfect. What is your?
15. As a part
15.
of the panel, judge if proposals to modification as a part of the panel.
Okay, as a part of a panel. Does anyone have, did anyone have one that they weren't sure, that it might have been a condition, but they weren't sure? because those are very good examples. Okay, let's give a few examples of standards. How well do they have to do it? Which ones have a standard? Which one should we look at?
13.
13.
Because it says at least 3 ways.
At least 3 ways.
Okay, how well do they have to do it? And you know, this is really helpful if you write open-ended questions on your exams. Okay, this is very helpful to students if you indicate how good an answer does it have to be. So for example, distinguish, and so it's really saying, tell me the difference between emissions and combustion characteristics. How is our emissions different from combustion characteristics? Okay, I'm the student who doesn't know anything. I give you one way they're different, and you come back to me and say that's not an adequate answer. Well, I did, okay? But if you tell me I have to give you 3, I can meet the standard. It also helps the person who knows a lot, because they might know 10 ways they're different, and they spend a lot of time to write 10 ways, and then they found out, oh, I only had to say 3. It's like, oh, well, why don't you tell me that? So it's very helpful in open-ended questions to give students an idea of, you know, what is an acceptable answer? What's an acceptable response? Okay, another example? 3.
The standard in order to meet specific limits and the following criteria.
Yes, okay. It has to meet that characteristic. Another one? Oh, it's not?
Yes.
Oh, it is. I was going to say, we're going to send somebody on a search party for the lunch. Lunch is here? Okay. Let's just do one more example of a standard. 13.
15.
Okay, we said 13.
22.
15. Oh, 15. Standard is
Possible,
suitable, outstanding. Okay. I'll go in, yeah, okay. Let's leave it at that. That's right.
22.
22.
22.
Has to be effective and efficient. Okay. Does someone have?
We have a doubt in
Okay.
number 4. Could it be understood that the non-technical person could be a standard or a condition?
A standard, because I might say to you, how good of an explanation do I have to give? Okay. It has to be good enough and clear enough that a non-technical person would understand it. That's a standard. Okay. So it would be very different. And why would I put that in? Because what if I have to explain jet propulsion to an aerospace engineer? That's a different outcome from explaining jet propulsion to me. Okay.
So,
So
number
that's number 9.
9, a conventional steam power plant is also a standard.
Yeah,
That's a
if
condition.
anything, it would be a condition, because it would be, you know, in what circumstance, you know, conduct a heat balance. But you might even consider that unless you put the whole sentence together, you really don't know what the skill and behavior is. But if anything, it could be. It answers the question, in what kind of situation, or in what circumstance.
Yeah,
Okay.
but it also has to be so good that a conventional steam power plant can handle,
Oh,
because it's conduct a heat balance over a conventional steam power plant. So I don't know.
yeah, but you want to take it from the perspective of look at the behavior and how well do I have to conduct this? Okay.
There is no standard
And
there.
so I would say it's not a standard. Because you want to say, how well do I have to conduct, as the learner, conduct the heat balance? Okay. And some of these.
14 is different planning techniques is standard. 14.
13, 14. No, you know, what would make it a standard? What would make it a standard? Analyze and evaluate different planning techniques.
3 or 4.
3.
Infinity,
Different.
There's 3 planning
But if I said at least 2, 3, That's a good idea. Different is too mushy.
Different could be 2 or could be 10.
And so you don't really know. Nice job. Let's keep going.
¿Cómo?